Hi guys, I am coming to you with a video today with great excitement and pleasure. I had the opportunity to have a one-on-one chat with another YouTuber also having suffered with eczema. Her name is Ully. She recently reached out to me a couple of weeks or months ago to say hello, and from there we sort of got to chatting, and I found out about her sort of plant-based eczema healing story, and so we connected on Skype and we had about an hour's worth of conversation around eczema healing, other factors besides food contributing to healing your eczema or even contributing to causing some of your eczema symptoms. We talked about, what are great protocols, a balanced diet versus fasting and cleansing, and a whole host of other awesome stuff. Now, aside from this video, she has a ton of awesome content on her channel, so please go check it out. She has things about preparing food, little vlogs here and there, and also just some other advice about sort of skincare routine and navigating the world with eczema and newly healed skin. So 2 thumbs up. I would recommend you guys check her out, and I hope you enjoy the interview. Peace. I'm happy that we can do another Skype session. It was a really fantastic conversation we had the last time. I enjoy talking to people about, their eczema healing journey, and also what worked for them, what didn't, troubleshooting, successes, and how long their process was, or everybody's is a little bit different. And I think the handful of people that I have talked to who sort of go about it in a holistic way have similar stories. So I want to sort of piece that together and show people that you're not alone and you're not crazy with the issues that you're facing.
No, definitely. That's great.
So please introduce yourself, Ully. Tell us your story, a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so my name is Ulrika, or Ully, and I have had eczema pretty much since I was born. I had it really, really badly when I was a baby, and then when I was quite a small child, and then it went away for a bit, and then it came back, and I've had it pretty much on and off for best part of 15 years, I'd say, if not more. Yeah, I always used steroids. That was just how I had managed it, and it had worked for a decent amount of time, but then it got to a point where I realized, firstly, whenever I stopped using steroids, it would always come back, and it would always come back way worse. And also, secondly, that the doctors kept just prescribing stronger and stronger steroids. So I got really nervous about this because my uncle had eczema, and he has sort of damaged the skin on his hands from prolonged steroid use. So I'd always kind of known and been a bit wary about steroid use. So I just got kind of freaked out, I guess. And I came across the plant-based vegan diet, and I was like, oh my God, I really need to give this a go. And this was over a year ago. And then since then, I pretty much, I wouldn't say I'm completely 100% eczema free, but like compared to how I was, I mean, it's pretty amazing. Like the results.
Yeah, I did see some of your older videos. I think you started your channel a couple of months ago, and you guys are gonna should check it out. It's part of why I'm trying to plug her stuff. She's got some good information there. You're a lot better with the camera than I am. I don't do a lot of vlogging. I do mostly, I sit down and I just shoot a video.
No. I love watching your videos. They're so engaging.
So she's got some good stuff in there, and what I was getting at is that this doesn't have to be like a super long journey. A lot of people might think that this takes years, or like you're going to be in a healing crisis for as long as you can, the foreseeable future. But I think your journey was pretty short, in my opinion. I think you can see some pictures. Like, I've had quite similar eczema to what you've experienced, sort of like around the knees and arms, and a little bit on the face. Welcome to my current issue right now. But yeah, I think a lot of people are facing similar severity of eczema, that it's about a year's process from start to finish, and I think it's pretty doable.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not crazy.
Absolutely. I was sort of expecting it to take a lot longer, because also it doesn't sort of go like, there's no like gradual improvement. It was really bad for a really long time, and it seemed like it was getting worse, and then just all of a sudden it got like improved within 2 weeks, and then it was kind of since then it's just been at that sort of really good state. Like, I don't have any eczema on my body anymore. But I do still have it on a few really stubborn places. So I always seem to have it a little bit on my neck, and on my hands as well. My hands, it's a really hard place to sort of heal your eczema, because you're always like washing them and like, and touching things. So yeah.
I don't want to get into too much like how, like, with things that I've read about this kind of stuff, but sort of in the places where you've had eczema the longest, or sort of were the most stubborn, are usually the last place to heal. In my own experience, that happened the same way. I think it started when I was a kid around my arms and my legs, and that was pretty much the last place where it had cleared up the first time around.
Yeah.
So I think that could be the case. It could be a matter of, you know, just continuing the diet and refining things as you go.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I also find like, yeah, there are some areas that I know that sort of they get better and worse depending on sort of my diet and my lifestyle, because obviously now that the rest of my body is pretty much there, I obviously have become a lot more relaxed with all sorts of different things, and it's just like last remaining little areas that, you know, that those are the ones that kind of keep me on track, that tell me like, okay, no, you've had too much sugar, or you haven't slept enough, you're stressing too much. Like, they kind of come back a little bit every single time. Like,
interesting.
Yeah, things sort of veer off track a little bit.
So I know a little bit about your diet journey, that you were a little bit more strict in the beginning and are a little bit more lax right now. So I think I was quite similar, but I'm curious, like, you know, how your journey went.
Yeah, so I kind of first, so I actually discovered the vegan diet sort of a different way. I watched a film called Cowspiracy, which I'm sure if anyone here is vegan, I'm sure will have watched it. And I was really interested, and you know, I sort of brought up lots of things that I just had no idea about. Like, okay, some people argue that it's like completely inaccurate, but either way, like, it does bring up some really important issues. So I started researching that, and I think I went on YouTube, and you know, there's like millions of vegan YouTubers, and there was this one video that came up, and I don't know if it was some kind of like scary like Google algorithm who knows me really well, but I genuinely think it was either your video or Rob Stewart's video that came up that was like, you know, vegan plant-based diet to heal eczema. And I was like, oh my God, I have eczema. This video is like targeting me. So then I watched it, and obviously then I found your channel. And this was literally on the same day pretty much that I watched Cowspiracy. So, and then I watched loads. I literally like binge watched all these like videos that you had, and all like the results you'd had. And I was just completely convinced. It was literally like overnight. But then and then at first, obviously, when you go into something which is quite, you know, I came from a very sort of dairy heavy, meat heavy diet, quite European, I'd say. And it's quite a change going on to the vegan diet. So at first I really didn't know what I was doing. Like, I just, you know, went into the fridge and I like sort of threw out all my cheese and all my ham, and then I was like, okay, I have literally nothing left here but like a baguette and some carrots. So it's pretty much like the first, and then obviously you like educate yourself a bit, and then you research a bit more. But then I kind of, as my sort of journey went on, so I first like started just, you know, vegan plant-based, and I thought that was great. And then sort of slowly I started like watching a few more videos and getting advice from different people. And I think sometimes when you overwhelm yourself with too much information and too many opinions, you end up, because you're desperate, you end up kind of believing everything. And that kind of made me almost a bit scared of all sorts of things that weren't necessarily, I didn't really need to be scared of. So I was like terrified of gluten, I was terrified of oil, I was terrified of anything that had any kind of like synthetic item or chemical. And in hindsight, I think it got to a point where it started getting a little bit obsessive. So I almost went into like a raw vegan diet, and I did that for quite a long time, because again, my skin was getting worse at this point. So I thought, oh, I must be doing something wrong, like I must not be on the correct vegan plant-based diet. And actually, like, when I was on this raw vegan diet, and I think that eventually led to a few problems for me. Like, it really didn't suit me, and it really doesn't suit my kind of physiology, I guess. And on top of the fact that you kind of created this sort of like these food fears in your head, which I think also when you become too stressed and too obsessed and you sort of go up into your own head a little bit too much, and that's definitely what I did. And I think that it definitely wasn't helping my skin at all, because then when I came back and I kind of, you know, I went and saw a doctor, and the doctor said, you know, like you're not having your period, you're not eating enough fats, you've got too much, you know, blood sugar in your blood because you're basically only eating fruit. And then I kind of realized, oh gosh, yeah, I am sort of taking things a bit too far. And eventually I kind of went on a bit more of a relaxed vegan diet, and sort of one that just suited me. And I think that was when actually my skin started to clear up so quick. So it really does, like, your mental state definitely makes a difference as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of merit to this paranoia behind eating some of the foods. I've been caught in that cycle, like thinking that a certain food or like a food group could be contributing to it or causing it. And sort of when you shy away from it, or you relax your paranoia, that's when things you can actually start to see, like, that's not actually causing the problem. It's that stress, that cortisol can actually be causing you problems. But with that being said, I do think that there is some like merit to, like, especially in the earlier stages of your healing, like if you stay away from certain foods like the gluten, especially refined sugars and carbohydrates, that's pivotal, because you're in a very sensitive state. That healing process, you're a little bit more reactive than further down the line. That's why you could afford to relax a little bit and, you know, have a little oil, have a little, I mean, within reason, I think. But yeah, it's kind of crazy, like how we see food and when we eat it, like that can have a huge trigger effect. And I don't know how people go about incorporating and not incorporating foods, but I would err on the side of just eating whole plant foods and not hyper focusing on a specific food group like nightshades people do commonly do. So yeah, have a little bit more of a relaxed approach. If you are noticing though that your eczema is just wildly out of control, spring for, you know, some medical advice, spring for some testing, go to an allergenist, and, you know, sort of check that box, like, yes, it could be actually a food group. You're not crazy.
No, I completely agree. And I think we talked about the fact that we both agree that a sort of a whole foods, plant-based diet, without any, you know, processed rubbish or too much sugar and these kind of things, that's going to be, well, I reckon, in my opinion, it'll be like the foundation to most people's healing. And then firstly, within that, there might be some variations. You know, some people, for example, I don't do that well with fruit, and I didn't really realize this till a bit later down the line. Whereas other people, like, fruit is just like their absolute miracle food. And it's like you said, if you have to be very sort of intuitive with your own body, and you have to sort of not just listen to what worked for other people, but really sort of listen to your own body. And like you said, if you do have, you know, reactions to things, and, you know, you eat certain foods and your digestion is weird, then it's absolutely worth going to see a doctor and getting some actual answers. Because that's something that I for some reason I was reluctant to go for a while, because I thought that they were just going to give me more steroids, or they were just going to laugh at me. But actually going to a doctor is definitely worth it, and especially if, you know, you change something really radical, and, you know, if you want to get levels tested and things like that, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, I think especially with this YouTube community and like how much information we have on the web, we start to think that, like, we get afraid of doctors and that they're the devil a little bit. I have certainly been there. I have thought, like, you know, how many times I've been let down by naturopaths and dermatologists. I thought to myself, like, they're all going to say the same thing at the end of the day. So I might as well go about it my own way and look to the people who have the results. And there's some credit in that, but it's not absolute credibility. It's not the, you know, end all, because an anecdote is just that. So yeah, if you find the doctors that are practicing plant-based nutrition and offering that kind of consultation, I think that's who you should go to if you're going to look for a doctor, somebody who is well versed in nutrition and whole foods plant-based diets, because then they're going to be a little bit more aware of your issue and how to, like, tackle a treatment plan if you go down that route. But with that being said, I think that people can still get some benefits doing it on their own. I certainly did the first time around. I mean, and so did you as well. I mean, What I'm curious to know is, like, did you have any like troubleshooting aside from the obvious, like the diet was very restricted in the beginning, but like, did you notice anything else was off with your health, you know, when you came into this?
Yeah, so I had a few different issues because I had a lot of hormonal imbalances. Actually, sorry, do you mind if I just really quickly shut my blind?
Go for it.
The sun like coming through and it's kind of stressing me out. No. Oh fuck, it's not working.
It's sunnier in the UK than it is here.
I know. I don't know if that worked. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. Yeah, so I had a lot of sort of hormonal issues, and well, I don't know if they were issues at first, but I had quite recently, before I started the vegan, whole food, plant-based diet, I had come off the pill, so the birth control pill, and since then I had never had my period, and throughout the whole sort of healing process, I never got that back. Yeah. And initially I thought again that it was to do with the fact that I'd just come off birth control and, you know, everything was going to sort itself out eventually. And I didn't really listen to, again, I didn't want to acknowledge the sort of signs that my body was telling me that something was wrong. And then on top of the fact that I lost quite a lot of hair. Mm-hmm. And I think this is why I'm just always telling people to not go too extreme, because I took it to the absolute extreme and it doesn't do well for your body at all. Mm-hmm. And I think that I went to the doctor eventually and she said, you know, all these things, you know, if you have hormonal imbalances, then, you know, like having too much sugar, not having enough fats, like all these kind of things are going to really sort of, you know, your body isn't going to like that. So again, I really took her advice and eventually sort of tweaked my diet a little bit, and it took, I'm not joking, like a month for everything to sort itself out. So it really does go to show again, like you have to listen to your body if it's telling you something. So for example, if you're a woman and you know your cycle is not regular or it's not even there like it was for me, then that is definitely a warning sign and something that you should go get checked out. And similarly, if you're noticing sort of quite big changes, like for me it was like my hair again, it was falling out quite a lot. And now it started growing back in again. So I kind of thought, again, I didn't want to notice it, or I didn't like think about it. I was like, oh, I just have thin hair. That's just what my hair is like.
Detoxing.
Yeah, exactly. My hair is detoxing. Yeah. And so all these kind of things. So it was a few different things like that. And on top of the fact that I was very, very, very low energy, particularly during the winter months. Really, really low energy. Like I just got up in the morning and I'd want to go back to sleep again after 2 hours. And I found it just really hard to motivate myself. At the same time, I was like pushing myself. I was like going to go to the gym every day, like all this kind of stuff. And then I went to, and the same thing, like when I went to the doctor, she was like, you are chronically low in vitamin D. You have like no vitamin D basically in your bloodstream. Oh. And then as soon as I started taking some more vitamin D, and I know this is something that's not necessarily to do with your diet, it's more to do with, you know, if you live in like a climate where you have long winters. But again, these are things that it turns out later on that vitamin D is really important for your skin. It's really important for your fertility. So again, it's just really, really worth kind of doing a bit of like a MOT on yourself and like figuring out like, you know, if what's right and what's wrong and sort of tweaking it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I experienced some of these same like troubleshooting, like mystery symptoms, almost like, you know, lost my cycle during the healing journey, like, because I was on an ultra low fat diet during that time, like almost paranoid, like I wouldn't touch nuts, seeds, avocados. Oh my God. And then it had happened again the second time around after I had gone into remission, and then sort of came back after some medication use didn't break down properly. And I again fell back into a really ultra low fat diet, thinking that'll help me, you know, eat myself out of this problem once again. But likewise, it wasn't until I started to reincorporate, you know, like, you know, whole plant fats and sort of rounding out my diet, not like, because the more you refine, the more you restrict where you get your nutrients from, because broccoli has X, Y, and Z nutrients. But if you add broccoli and collard greens, you make up for what the broccoli doesn't have, and likewise the collard greens. So in a sense, when you have a varied diet, you are less likely to have these nutritional inadequacies. And I think that was a big part for me, like, you know, incorporating these plant fats, incorporating other plants and not saying, oh, I only like broccoli, I'm only going to eat broccoli.
Obviously, don't you?
Yeah, and it was, again, it was like a month, and like things started to fall back into place. My nails started growing back. I used to have like the white spots on my nails as if they were damaged, but that's nutritional, some zinc deficiency or something. And likewise, my cycle came back in like 5 weeks or something. It was like back to normal, right where I picked up, where I left off. And it was another thing that, like, I used to have the same thing that you had, like when you wake up and you have this sort of like fatigue, almost like I slept enough. I didn't exhaust myself the day before. I'm not waking up extremely early, because with my schedule, I make it so I sleep enough. And yet I was still feeling like I have to go back to sleep right after I wake up.
Yeah.
And that sort of resolves itself, sort of like when you, again, reevaluate your diet and you start to like see, like, you know, what does my body need in this situation?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and it takes a little bit of time, and I also think that the stress plays into it as well. You talked about this the last time we spoke. Like, how do you see stress play into your eczema, you know, journey?
Yeah, so I think like stress and sugar for me are like my biggest triggers for eczema. And I noticed that whenever I have like a prolonged period of being stressed, and at the time I was a student, so it was like constantly sort of like exams, deadlines, presentations. So I was like, that could also be part of the reason why it felt like it was getting quite bad for quite a long time. But I also kind of realized that I started to sort of stress myself out. And again, it goes back to the whole thing that I just became far too obsessive. Like, I definitely crossed the line between being sort of committed to the plan and to sort of the healing process, and then just becoming way, way, way too obsessed to the point where if I had a social occasion coming up where I knew that, I wouldn't be able to control the food, then I would stress about it for days beforehand. Or conversely, if I had something, if I was, going out for lunch or something, and I would only ever order, steamed vegetables and something. But then if there was like a tiny little bit of oil on those steamed vegetables and I didn't realize until afterwards, then afterwards I'd be sitting there and basically just like rutting about the fact that I'd had some oil, and then my skin would get worse. And then it'd be like, oh, it must be the oil, rather than being like, actually, it wasn't the fact that you had the oil. It was the fact that you'd been stressing about the fact that you'd had the oil. Because again, it's like, when you have little bits here and there, if you're consistently good with your diet, if you're consistently clean, that if you by accident have a little bit of oil or have a little bit of sugar, whatever it is that you find is sort of triggering for you, then it isn't going to make a huge amount of difference, as long as you go straight back to, what you're doing and don't stress about it. Because if you stress about it, then it definitely will have a much bigger than it needs to.
Yeah, these ends or the ends of the extreme on the spectrum can really do some damage. I do remember, this is a bit of a tangent, but maybe 6 months after I went vegan, I initially went vegan for ethical reasons, because my father's vegetarian, and I had watched Forks Over Knives, and I was like, okay, cool, done. Like, that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah.
And then everything sort of came in afterwards, all the other documentaries and like information, and so I was like, I didn't know how to cook or eat for this diet. And what ultimately ended up happening is I started following YouTubers' advice, and I fell into eating a lot of like raw foods and also refined sugar, and doing a little bit way too high carbohydrate, low fat. And I fell into a place where I think I was eating like a lot of refined sugar, and I was like, why is this causing me skin problems? It's not fat. It's the fat that causes the skin problems, but it's actually anything in excess.
Absolutely.
The reason why I shy away from oil is because oil is a refined product, and it's easy to sort of overdose on a tablespoon. You just glug it on anything, and all of a sudden your fat content for the day goes up.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a teaspoon here and there, or you have a tablespoon here and there, it's not the difference between having a flare-up and having clear skin. But when you let it in your diet, my moderation is way out of whack. I don't have any moderation. So for that reason, I was going crazy on the refined sugar, and then I started to notice, like, oh
oh no, it's not, you know, just the fat. It could be anything, this kind of excess, you know, even the sugar, even not having any fats whatsoever. So there is something to say for a balanced diet that, you know, is really pivotal to helping you heal in the beginning. Otherwise, you're sort of just feeding into this eczema even further in some instances,
I think,
unfortunately.
yeah, I think that's such a good point that you just raised. It's the extremes of anything that is going to be. It's not just sort of, well, I don't know, I can't speak for everyone, but for me, it certainly is not healthy for me physically, and I don't think it's necessarily, or it can be sort of unhealthy in a mental way as well. And you know, for me now, I generally just go by a very easy rule of thumb, sort of like some fats, some carbs, and some protein. I don't like overthink anything, because that generally, if you have, you know, you think about, you want to have those three things on your plate at every meal,
Yeah.
you are most likely not going to have anything in excess.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that's just how it is. There's only so much you can eat for a meal.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of, it's quite like an easy rule, but for me that just really worked. And rather than sort of constantly having to be like, oh, like I can't have any of this, or I have to only have this, like, and it's a very hard way to live. I found, like, it was for me when I was sort of on the raw vegan diet, like, and this isn't, you know, saying anything bad about people who are on the raw vegan diet and it really, really works for them. But for me, for where I was and for my lifestyle and the sort of the people I hang out with and the places I ate, like, it wasn't sustainable for me. And because it wasn't a sustainable lifestyle for me, it caused a lot of sort of additional stresses that probably would have added to sort of being an obstacle to me healing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that I was very worried about was like, am I eating too many fats? And the thing is that if you're focusing on a whole foods plant-based diet where essentially carbohydrates are at the center of your meal, it's really hard to overdo it on the fats, in my opinion, unless you're sitting there with a bag of nuts in front of the telly, like, you know, just eating them. The thing is that even like now when I'm a lot more conscious to get enough plant fats and to have a little bit at each meal, and just even if I really want some more, it's kind of like, yeah, my body maybe wants some more. But if I'm sitting there eating 2 avocados, I'm like, all right, maybe that's a little bit too much. But within reason, it's kind of hard to go over that, you know, sort of, if I had to give it a number, maybe 15 to 25% of your calories coming from fats. It's pretty much really hard to be eating over 25% on a whole foods plant-based diet without having like 3 or 4 avocados. You're kind of, you would notice if it's that.
Yeah.
And this is one thing I wanted to really touch on now that I had put out a video on Rob Stewart, is that these extremes that at the very beginning of my journey, I thought it was very pivotal to have cleanses and detoxes.
Yeah.
And now that I look into it more and more, it's actually something you might want to shy away from with eczema, because there's a lot going on in the body. You're going to release a lot of toxins doing these crazy protocols such as water fasting, where you're starving the body of any nutrients.
Yeah.
Juice cleanses, again, 0 fiber, 0 overt fats. You might throw yourself into hormonal imbalances, as I had when I did like a 10-day juice fast.
Yeah.
And, you know, all these other kinds of protocols like intermittent fasting. I don't want to confuse the body. Like, I want to sort of give it a reliable source of nutrients, a well-rounded balance of nutrients, and I want to keep it consistent over time so that it can start to trust me and repair, right? So in many respects, now I'm sort of changing my attitude on this, like, don't do the crazy cleanses that are going to heal you in 21 days. Ain't going to happen. This is like months of recovery is what this is going to be, which is something now. It's a great segue that you don't need 100% plant-based diet, which maybe people think that I'm against it because I'm vegan and I have a vegan agenda. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm vegan for my reasons. I'm not vegan to impose health problems on people. And in many cases, you do think that you need to incorporate some animal products. So please talk about it. I'm not opposed to it.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because so I kind of have very recently started adding back in some eggs, and before that I had started eating every now and again some fish, and mostly some oily fish, so things like salmon and sardines. And other than that, my diet is pretty much completely as it was before. It's very, you know, whole food, plant-based. So I like to still call myself plant-based because it is, you know, based on that diet.
Won't kick you out of the club.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but I still, you know, I can't call myself a vegan anymore because vegan is obviously is very sort of definitive in what that actually means. But yeah, the reason that I started to incorporate these things was firstly because I really started craving fish. And at first I'd craved it for a really long time, and I kind of ignored it because obviously at the time I was just very sort of, you know, I'm going to stick to this, and I'm, you know, cravings don't necessarily mean that you need that thing, but you know, so I kind of ignored it for a long time. But then eventually I kind of realized that I have a hard time digesting a lot of plant-based proteins, specifically things like beans and legumes and pulses and these kind of things. And obviously these are really, really important if you're going to be on a vegan sort of plant-based diet, because this is going to be your source of protein. But I can't eat a huge amount of those. It gives me a really bloated stomach, basically like IBS type symptoms. I'm actually seeing someone for that just to see, but that was definitely something that a very like strong reason why I kind of decided, okay, I actually need to get some kind of animal proteins. But at the same time, I was also very conflicted because I, you know, having gone vegan plant-based, it wasn't just completely about my health. But it was also about the fact that I, you know, now was so aware of all the ethical reasons and the environmental impact that, you know, eating too much meat would have. So I kind of thought, okay, well, I'll have some eggs because I thought, you know, that would be as minimal impact as I could have for me to have the sort of animal proteins that I felt like I needed. But at the same time, just sort of kind of feel okay with it, I guess, a little bit morally. I know some people are going to really argue against me for this, but this was sort of, I had to find a balance for myself somehow. And this was kind of my way and how I did it, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, I have my reservations on animal products, and I notice, like, you know, anytime you bring that up, especially with people who are in a critical state of like trying to heal themselves, they can get defensive about it, and it's nothing personal. Like, honestly, you know, I bring it up as like sort of an argument to highlight the benefits of the whole plant foods, not so much the evils of the animal products.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a far more healing diet to have a plant-centered whole foods, you know, based on carbohydrates, not a ketogenic plant-based diet, than it is to have animal products in high proportions or as the center of your diet, for that matter. I'm not going to have as many quips with you having an egg here and there and fish when sort of in addition to basically a whole foods plant-based diet, whereas the eggs and the fish are the basis of your diet. Those are two very different diets.
Exactly. And I do want to reiterate that I mean, I have eggs like once a week, maybe maximum. Yeah. And, you know, that's okay. And similarly fish, you know, it's one of those things where you just kind of have to find, you know, kind of what works for you. And obviously there is the kind of striking the balance between the sort of all the environmental and the ethics, and then also kind of putting, you know, doing what works for you. But I know what you mean when you talk about the sort of, whether it's like the evils of the animal products. And I don't necessarily think that, you know, eating animals is probably not necessarily the worst thing in the world, as in nutritionally. It's probably very good for you. But we have to also remember that a lot of the animal products that we get nowadays have been sort of refined or processed in a way that they wouldn't have been sort of like, you know, 100, 200 years ago. So there is kind of that difference and that element that you have to take into consideration when you're actually trying to heal yourself from an inflammatory disorder. So I think that's, yeah.
Regarding like proteins and like these beans and pulses, like you said, that you had problems digesting. This is just something that I remembered when I first had started this whole foods plant-based diet, that like I was incorporating a lot of whole plant foods, and like sort of that bombardment of just switching my diet over from sort of processed standard Western diet. I was eating French fries and burgers a week before going whole foods plant-based.
Yeah.
And veggie burgers, of course. But I started eating things like brown rice, beans, bananas, and porridge at every single meal. And it was like 2 or 3-fold increase in how much fiber I was eating in a day. So it took me almost like a month to get over bloating issues.
Yeah.
Now, for some people that could be a month, you know, the whole bloating and stuff like that. And I think that's fine. You know, it sort of takes time for the stomach to get accustomed to the new foods that are coming into it. Anytime you change your diet, it takes somewhere around a month, 2 months to adapt your bacteria in the stomach to digest what you're eating.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's more than a month or two that you're noticing, brother, that's when you should actually like sort of investigate your diet a little bit.
Yeah.
And for myself, I do a lot better on lentils. I don't eat a lot of black beans, kidney beans, all this stuff, because it's just so much easier for me to eat the right amount of beans through lentils than anything else. Those are just, it's kind of too much for me. So again, it's like, you know, assessing what works, what doesn't. Some people do really bad on like broccoli type foods, like brassicas, the cruciferous foods. Yeah. I can't do raw cauliflower, broccoli, horrible bloated gas, nothing.
Not like that.
So it's sort of like these little refinements. And what I found interesting is that I'm sorry to bring this up, but Rob was saying, like, you know, you got to refine your diet, you got to change it up a little bit. I agree with certain ingredients, like, oh, I do better with these beans than these beans, these vegetables versus these vegetables, but not like an entirely different approach. Like, I do better with beef, not broccoli. That's like crazy to me.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It still blows my mind that someone can think that a diet based on low fiber, low nutrients, and very high fat and protein can promote overall health.
Yeah.
It's like if I were to eat avocados only, I don't think that would promote me.
Exactly. Well, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying. It's about like being, you know, too extreme, or, you know, these kind of, and you know, when you brought up the whole cleansing, detoxing thing as well, that was again like it for me. That's like it's quite an extreme thing to do, an extreme way to go about your healing. And again, some people absolutely swear by fasting. So this isn't to say, you know, it didn't work for me, so it won't work for you. But when I did it, for example, same as you, I just completely, you know, I had such a miserable time. Firstly, I was so hungry. It was just,
it's terrible.
Into this, you know, enlightened state when you kind of get over. It's like that never happened.
No, I never tapped into that.
Yeah, exactly. And then same thing as you. It's like it was very, very extreme. I went from absolutely no food for 3 days to eating way too much food, because obviously by the third day I was so hungry, and I ended up just like binging on everything I could find in the fridge and cupboards, like for the whole day. And it's the same kind of thing. I just don't think with your diet, like the composition of your diet, your body doesn't like extremes. I don't think, you know, maybe some people do, but like for me personally anyway, it just does not like these kind of extremes. So yeah.
I don't know if you'd had experienced this, but like when I was healing the first time around, it was close to it was 2 years ago. It takes you away. Like, you do want to heal relatively quickly because you've suffered with this for so long, and you kind of are almost excited to find a quick fix or something that's going to be like the quick route to, you know, full skin recovery. So I did find a lot of things like juice fasting. That was the first thing I had experimented with. Then it was like a banana cleanse. Like, I was just eating
I did those as well.
5 or 7 days, which got me to the point where I didn't eat bananas for many months because I was just sick of them. I couldn't eat them. And then
I don't even want to look at banana again.
Oh boy. And then I did like potato cleanse, and I think the problem with these things are, number one, it disheartens you when you don't get the success, and you start to think, oh, plants aren't going to heal me, or oh, you know, I got it. Or then you eat junk food, and then all of a sudden you're back to where you started. It's happened to me before. But again, I want to come back to a balanced diet, you know, a balanced whole foods plant-based diet. That variety will keep you going for a very long time. It'll keep you healing more consistently, even with the ups and downs of, you know, skin healing. It's a very complicated thing. It's an autoimmune issue. It has so many different parts of the body are involved. So the balanced diet, I think, in the long run is going to be your best bet. It's so attractive to want to go to water fast, juice fast, cleanses, all banana, all potato, but then you miss out on the nutrients, you miss out on the variety, and you miss out on the consistency in your diet.
Yeah.
which is something that can really set people back. You know, some people will swear by potato cleanse, but, you know, follow me up on your 6-month potato cleanse. How are you feeling? Like,
Yeah, exactly. How do
I'm
you
bored and frustrated.
yeah.
So yeah, I do like, I like the balance and the diet, or the variety in a whole foods plant-based diet. I think in the long run you're going to be better off with it. Even if you have some bread here and there, even if you have like an egg or a piece of fish, I think you will notice and you will learn from either your mistakes or your successes what works.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Absolutely. And I think like if you have a sort of a balanced diet, we have to remember that it's not actually all about the food. It's about your entire your lifestyle, you know, sort of how you're feeling within yourself. And, you know, the food is obviously a huge component of that, not just physically, but also kind of emotionally, because and having like a balanced diet, something that's sustainable, something enjoyable experience. And, you know, going through something like this, if you've chosen to go through the sort of the natural healing process, it's a very difficult process. So you want to keep it as, you know, minimal, stressful, and as minimal like difficult as you can. And I think if you start, you know, being really sort of obsessive and strict and militant with yourself, like your skin is already having a hard time, you know, you don't need to be even sort of meaner to yourself, which kind of is how I felt when for example, when I fasted. But again, like going back to fasting, there is science behind fasting that it does have huge improvements, and it does have amazing benefits to, you know, it makes people live longer and things like that. But again, it's just, for me, it was in the day-to-day, and I felt like in the day-to-day I just didn't enjoy these things, and because I just didn't enjoy them, it wasn't good for my mental, you know, well-being, and that definitely had a link to my physical one. So you've just got to really try and sort of be compassionate with yourself, almost like, and compassionate with your skin and compassionate with your own body, and sort of live in a way that is, it's like you're trying to look after yourself, basically. As, you know, almost imagine yourself that you're a friend who's going through the same thing, and you want them to be in sort of like the least distressed and the most comfortable ways they possibly can be, you know, on top of all their, you know, skin problems. And then you kind of have to ask yourself, like, what makes this person feel good? What makes this person feel happy? Like, what's going to be comforting to this person, like, in this moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially when I was like very militant to exercise a lot in the beginning of my healing journey, and that can be very stressful, especially when you don't feel like you feel physical discomfort from sweating that much, but also number two, like, there are times when you can't wear the short sleeves or the shorts when you're going out to exercise or something like that. And it's sort of, again, listening to your body and like, okay, maybe now's the time to be a couch potato and to just eat healthy and relax, and I'll get into a better place where exercising is not so stressful. This whole stress, exercise, and feeding, you do have to listen to when things are like red flags, when you're like in the pit of your stomach, you're like, something's not right.
Absolutely.
So with the exercise also, I got into a weird place where I was like exercising so much, and not only was I like fatigued, but I just physically felt like nervous when I was going to exercise, when I wasn't feeling right. Like, I knew I was going to get itchy. I knew I was going to have to wear a short sleeve, and I wasn't feeling quite, you know, comfortable in my own skin. And it took sort of dialing back and like not exercising as much to also boost my recovery.
Yeah.
It's not all about going 100 miles an hour.
No, exactly. And that is, again, it touches on the point that it's not just about one thing. It's not completely 100% about the diet and, like, you know, cleansing yourself from the inside and all this kind of thing. But your skin is a very complicated organ. So, you know, obviously the inside is probably the most important part, but you have to also think about, you know, the fact that you have to look after it in a way that actually does work for your skin, and not be in denial if something doesn't work. So I have the same thing. Like, sometimes my skin doesn't do very well with sweat and if it gets too hot. So I had real like problems with this in the summer, and my skin was so inflamed during the summer. And it wasn't just because, it was because I was still going through my healing process and things weren't quite right on the inside, but obviously that meant on the outside it was like double whammy of, like, you know, things that were making it worse. But then I was also extremely militant that everything I was going to have and everything I was going to put on my body was going to be completely 100% natural, because I thought any kind of chemical or synthetic substance that was going to poison me, that was going to poison my skin, and that was, you know, going to completely stop me from healing. So I was using a lot of coconut oil on my skin, and for me, coconut oil just does not do well on my skin at all. I react a lot to coconut oil, but I was completely in denial. I was like, no, no, no. I've heard that coconut oil is what's, you know, is really good. It's completely natural this time. So I was slathering myself with all this coconut oil, thinking that everything that was coming out was all coming out from the inside, and it was just, you know, coming out of myself from the inside. I was totally in denial, when actually it was the fact that I was putting on coconut oil, and the fact that it was hot with coconut oil, that reaction on my skin was terrible. And again, as soon as I kind of stopped this way of thinking, when I was just like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? I'm just being ridiculous now. And I sort of switched back, and I use just now like I don't use a lot of moisturizer at all, to be honest, but when I do, I use a very sort of a mild, normal moisturizer that I found in a pharmacist. You know, like, it wasn't like a completely natural and that, again, it healed my skin so much, or at least I don't know if it healed it, but like, it was so much better for my skin than the coconut oil. So it's, again, it's those things, just listen to your body. You know, if things don't feel right, if something's reacting all the time, then, you know, just have a little assessment of like what it is that you're doing, and see if you're doing everything as as what's right for you.
I had a similar issue with coconut oil. Like, it must have been a year and a half ago. I was sort of going through that really like strong healing crisis. And a healing crisis is just essentially when you're sort of you're putting in more good than toxins are coming in, and that displaces the amount of toxins in the body. The liver can now like start breaking these down and releasing them in the bloodstream, and getting them out the body through the lungs, the urine, stool, and the skin, the last place. So essentially, it seems counterintuitive, but the better you eat, sort of, the more it gives your body the opportunity to get all this junk out.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know what? Coconut oil is antimicrobial. It's like super, you know, hydrating. And I started to just lather myself in it. And I think one night, I did like my face or something. And as I'm putting it on, I was feeling it itch. And I'm like, something's not right. Why is this happening? I was told so many good things about this. And really, like, some people genuinely don't react well to it. And I think that's like, when you have a red flag like that, like for me, peanuts, within 2 hours, I'll have like full skin problems. Nothing with my throat, nothing. I never had it as a kid, but
really?
It developed skin issue.
That's interesting.
For me, nuts, you notice it right away. So I guess a good way to go about it is like, don't think about it and do it. And if it causes like you to notice it and brings it to your attention, then it's kind of like, oh, okay, so maybe I should cut this out, and maybe I should stop doing this. That's kind of a good marker for myself, because then it relieves the paranoia of overthinking things and kind of filters that out.
Yeah,
I've had so many times when I thought it was something, but it was really something else.
Yeah, exactly. And then I guess it's trial and error as well. Like, everyone will be different, so things will work for one person, may not work for another person. And you do kind of almost have to experiment with yourself a little bit. Obviously, you don't do anything like crazy or anything extreme, but, you know, there is a lot of sort of like, you sort of start to realize, oh, actually, maybe this is what's causing it. Maybe it's not that, and maybe it's that kind of thing. But again, the best way probably is like we said before, like a really good way to get answers to these things is by going to your doctor and like figuring out, like, do you have an allergy to peanuts? Do you have an allergy to this? Do you have, you know, and they'll probably be able to give you a lot more answers than if you sort of are constantly sort of trying to guess your way forward. So don't be scared of doctors. Don't be scared of medicines, even though, you know, I sometimes personally disagree with, you know, constantly giving people, you know, certain treatments when I don't think it's appropriate, especially for me. Like the treatment that I was constantly being given just wasn't appropriate for me. But, you know, at the same time, like, doctors, like, they know their stuff, you know, they can really help you as well. So, you know, if you want answers to something, like, go to them, seek it, like, go find it, and they want to help you, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I had this paranoia with doctors for such a long time, and one thing I do want to say though, because sure, you can sort of troubleshoot your eczema and sort of DIY it to some
Yeah.
extent. And like, you know, you pick up on things that work and don't work, and you follow a whole foods plant-based diet and all that. I think if you're not in a bad place with your skin and things are getting a lot worse and things are not progressing like they should, clearly, then that's sort of the sign to start to look to a medical professional. That was what happened for me the second time around.
Yeah.
You know, I took some horribly strong medication, and it was like within a month, my flare-ups came back.
Really?
And I was in denial. Yeah, it took about a month after taking this oral steroid. I took it for 2 days, and within 4 weeks, from going from like 80–90% clear skin, I fell back into such a bad eczema that I missed my cousin's wedding because I just could not go.
Oh, poor you.
So that was like a red flag for me. I was like, oh man, maybe it's something I ate, or I don't know. And I was in denial for a very long time until it got to a point where I was like, all right, I have to seek out a proper, you know, protocol, like somebody who tests what's going on in my body, tells me this is what you got to eat, this is what you got to not eat. So my takeaway, long story short, is that if things aren't so bad, then yeah, by all means, you know, eat a, you know, balanced diet, tweak your diet with, you know, a little bit here and there. Things work, things don't work, add in certain things. But if things are clearly getting worse and worse, then I would suggest, you know, spring for those medical tests. Go for somebody who's, number one, a whole foods plant-based expert, and number two, will have the appropriate tests, you know, your urine and stool tests that say something's out of whack.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
Absolutely.
not going to say, you know, every single doctor is going to have a similar sort of appropriate response as my doctor did, but it's a better chance than sort of blindly guessing, you know, further treatment when things are not going right for you.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's oh my God, there's so much to say about reaching out for support, especially when you have like, you're in your very like low state.
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah.
I mean, I don't know what your experience was with the worst of your eczema, but how did you reach out for, like, you know, sort of support and comfort and to feel like you're not in this alone?
Yeah, so I had a really hard time with this because I think this is the thing about eczema, and I think that why eczema is so particularly sort of distressing to live with is because it affects your appearance so much, and your appearance is very much to do with your identity and like who you are, and that's how people remember you and how people see you. And so you feel like eczema is something that's almost like a part of you rather than something that is like happening to you. And for that reason, you feel like you need to be embarrassed for it, and you need to be ashamed of not just your skin, but just like who you are. It's incredibly like emotionally difficult sometimes to deal with. So I kind of, when I had it when I was a teenager, and obviously the teenager is the worst time to have it anyway, because you're self-conscious and you're awkward and, you know, all sorts of things going on. But yeah, I just did not want to talk to anyone about it. I never even mentioned it. I had a really bad eczema around my lips, particularly around my eyes and sort of around my legs and things. And I was just so incredibly embarrassed about it that I remember there were some days at school where I just wouldn't talk because I didn't want to talk, because I felt like if I talked, I would draw attention to myself and people would look at me, and then people would see me. And not only that, it was because, like, you know, you talk, you move your mouth and people look at your mouth, and I was like, oh God, like it was so difficult. And yeah, eventually I think it got to when I was at university, I almost failed my second year of university because I basically had awful eczema, and I just completely hid away from everyone, and I didn't want to go to the library because the library had daylight, and I thought daylight was like the worst kind of light for my skin, like literally it was like. And so I basically failed all my exams. And that summer when I spoke to my parents about it, was the first time I came out to my parents about it, and they knew obviously that I had eczema because, you know, but they had no idea how badly it affected me, like sort of like emotionally and psychologically. And my parents were absolutely devastated when I told them about it. But I think that was the thing, when you tell one person, it makes it easier to tell another person, and then all of a sudden it just becomes easier to talk about. And as soon as it becomes easier to talk about, you kind of release the sort of the emotional baggage that comes with having eczema. And as soon as you like kind of feel a little bit more open about it, and you can be a bit like, you know, yes, I have eczema. Yes, I've got a flare up today. Like things like that. It doesn't hurt you as much anymore as maybe when you're trying to hide it and you feel like you should be embarrassed about it. Because when you speak to people about it, you realize that people don't think less of you, and people will only ever feel like, you know, or for you, and you know, like we talked about last time, you don't like people like pitying you, but never going to be like, oh, you're a disgusting human being, you know?
Just stay away from those people.
Yeah, exactly. So and then when you kind of realize that within yourself, you're like, actually, you're right, like I have nothing to be embarrassed of. And I think that this mindset really helped me. I mean, at the beginning, when I first went through this like healing process, when obviously my skin was terrible for like, it was worse than I'd ever had even when I was a teenager at times. But even then, like I'd kind of sort of managed to sort of distance myself from it emotionally. And there were definitely days where I just didn't see people because you know, you kind of, sometimes you need days like that. You need to be by yourself. But I always had like I had a few different people that I knew, firstly, I could talk to, or I had my friends who I knew that I could have fun with without sort of them bringing up the fact that I had eczema. And also social media is a great place to reach out to people and to find other people who are going through the same thing. Like I wish that I'd had social media when I was younger, because I probably wouldn't have like suffered with it in a psychological way for so long. But I also think like with social media, you have to be a little bit careful, because I found that there were some, especially on Instagram, there were some accounts which were very I don't know, almost a bit like I'm absolutely pro, like, you know, being objective about like, oh, this is what my skin looks like, or the occasional like, you know, I'm having a bad day, like that kind of thing. But there were some accounts I found that were like, every single post was like, eczema is ruining my life, oh my god, it's the worst thing, oh my god, I'm this is terrible, like, all that kind of thing. And for me, that wasn't really what I wanted to be. Like that's not what I needed. I need like optimism and positivity, and I need to speak to people who are kind of going through things but have a very much like a yes, we're going to get through this kind of, that kind of determination. But you know, people can find what they want on social media. That's what's so great about it. You can connect to people like all over the world. So I think it's fantastic that we have it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm a very big supporter of optimism. A healthy level of fantasy and like disillusionment is going to be very helpful. I mean, I don't know if you're more introverted or extroverted, but I'm a 100% an extrovert. Like I'm just out and about. It was especially difficult for me because when I was at the worst with my eczema healing journey the first time around, I was just like sort of self-consumed in my own bubble. Like it's all I ever thought about. It's like I did not leave the house. I lived with my father at the time, and then it was like 8 or 9 months after starting that, I moved into my own apartment, and things got better. Like that was it was really helpful to leave the house and also to move to sort of a more quiet and relaxed place. So that helped.
Yeah.
But now this second time around, I'm going through it, and it's something I don't think about nearly as much. Like it'll come up in conversations, and it's certainly something I think about, you know, throughout the day, but it's not the same consuming thoughts as it used to be the first time around. So it's kind of like the kind of thoughts that you have, like, oh, I have chores to do today, or oh, there's this thing that I've got to do, or there's this thing in my life, versus feeling like it's like this looming doom over your head,
God,
which can exhaust you. It can take you away from doing things that you actually need to do, which is, you know, everyday life. So I got to the point where now I'm back at work. You know, I socialize with friends a lot more, and you know, I know I'm sort of many months away from feeling 100%, you know, normal and healed. But in my mind, I feel fantastic. So it does have a lot to do with your mental attitude and how you see your situation. I have this corny magnet on my fridge that my dad got for me. It says, instead of wishing the storm to be over, learn to dance in the rain. Because it's always going to be something else. If it's not eczema, then it's going to be something else. It's going to be your job, a relationship, external factor, something happening to you.
Exactly.
So you might as well embrace the adversity and sort of learn to weather the journey and enjoy the progress.
Yeah, and I think eczema particularly, like, your skin is like we said, if for some reason it's a little bit slow, it seems like, you know, everything else can be great and you're like, why is my skin still so bad? Like, I think your skin takes some time to catch up for some reason. I don't know what like the biological reason for that would be, but that's why it's almost like you have to just almost, you know, get your head in a good place, get all your lifestyle, your diet, all that in place, and then just go with it. Just keep going, and eventually things will or should sort themselves out. So yeah,
they just resolve themselves. One thing I noticed, like, because I had opted for these medical tests in like end of November.
Yeah,
I was having a terrible relationship with one of my friends. Like, it was just so much miscommunication, so much like so many things that I was thinking, like, oh, you are flaky, you're not listening, you're not doing this and that. And then at the same time, my skin was reacting at the same time at work. My boss was altering my schedule a lot, and it was really frustrating me. And like, it felt like all of this was just raining down on me.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's crazy. And now I sort of took a step back and took a breather, and things start to fall into place. Like, again, it's like it's a weather storm. It's insane. And I can't describe like why, you know, things just sort of start to sort themselves out with time. You do one thing and then other things will follow. So I did the tests. I started talking to my friend. I started talking to my boss. And, you know, it's a snowball effect. It can be a positive snowball effect, I think.
Exactly. And also, this is the thing. It's like with, you know, you have to be realistic with life. You can't control absolutely everything. So you're going to have to expect that sometimes, yes, things might be a little bit stressful with work, or you might have some arguments with your friends, or, you know, you might have a slightly stressful living situation. And again, it's about sort of being able to sort of calmly be like, okay, this is how the situation is right now. Like, accept that that's how it is, and, you know, keep doing the things that you can do. So, you know, if you can control your diet, you can control your lifestyle, like, keep doing those things. And I know that the things with life, like, nothing is forever, like, absolutely nothing is forever. So you've got to kind of expect that the ups and downs, and your skin kind of does go up and down together with things that happen in your life. So you almost have to just not freak out about it when that does happen, because it is inevitable, unless you like in the middle of nowhere and no one ever talks to you. And
I mean,
I really hope that doesn't happen to anyone.
No. I don't know if I told you this story the last time, but there was one point, it was January 2nd, and I was flying back home from the holidays.
Yeah.
And January 2nd, January 3rd, I was going to have my medical consultation. So I had a lot to look forward to. But it was January 2nd, and it was just so bitter cold when I arrived back in Vermont. And I was just, it was a culmination of, like, I got sort of just an itch attack on the airplane. It was really cold, and they didn't, like, you know, the flight was delayed, and there was a lot of things that were agitating me at once. And then I sort of just sat back, like, thinking to myself, like, wow, this is insanity. Like, there's just, everything's going wrong. And I started laughing, like, almost like in a, like, not a hysteria, but I was like, this is madness. This is fucking crazy. And I remember reading in, like, some of these, like, lectures and stuff about sort of how to, you know, calm the brain when things are going out of control, both positively and negatively. It's like, you got to recognize this is a roller coaster. If you've put in place the healthy practices or the practices you need to do to get your goal, you just got to recognize there are going to be a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like weight loss. Like, you know, this doesn't happen in a linear fashion, 1 pound a week as the weeks go on. You know, some weeks will be better than others, and you got to remove yourself from the process. That this is just something happening to you, and you have to do your best to sort of see that it resolves itself. You can't control it, though. It's not something.
Exactly. And don't stress yourself out trying to control it either, because yeah.
And things actually start to lift and get better when you do remove that intense sense of wanting to control the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So hope this helps everybody. I mean, I think we wrap it up around here. I have so much more to say. It's always fun to talk to you.
Yeah.
So guys, check out her channel, check out her videos. Your Instagram is also pretty interesting. I don't know, where do you like posting more, Instagram or YouTube, or what's your main platform?
Well, so I guess Instagram, because it's probably easier to take a picture than it is to, like, put up a video. But I'm trying to do more and more of the YouTuber.
Sure.
As like a full-time job. But yeah, definitely if you wanna check me out, that'd be cool. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed talking to you, Susan. I love you. It's so interesting talking to I was so amazed when you actually I don't know, started reaching out to me and that kind of thing, because I basically was inspired to go on my journey because of your videos. So in my head, I was like, oh wow, this mini Excellent celebrity kind of buzz.
No, I like to reach out to people who are especially putting themselves out there, because that's a big step. One of the hardest things is doing that first step out the door. So I saw you. By the way, the girl who I had seen on Instagram is Eczema Free Ellen. I'll send you her link. She's from Melbourne, Australia. She follows more of a medical medium protocol, and she's really funny, and she's very down to earth, very positive.
Yeah, that's what we like.
Yeah, I really like her sort of overall message, and there are a handful of other people who I'd like to reach out to, maybe get some more videos like this, because
definitely go for it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I have yet to get an interview with Greg. I would love to interview him as well.
That would be so interesting. You should definitely try and do that. That would be great.
Yeah, so I think we should talk again maybe in the near future.
Yeah, definitely. And let me know when you're coming to London.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I would love to do the two of us, I'd love to meet up, but I'd also like to see maybe other people in the UK or.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be so fun. Maybe we should organise a fun lunch or something.
I'll try to put something up.
Are you coming in May, did you say, or June?
Let me see. I'm coming May 27th. I'll be in London, May 27th through June 1st.
Okay, perfect.
About 4 or 5 days. I'm going to Canterbury after that to visit a friend in this little ocean town in the corner.
Yeah, I mean, it's lovely. It's a nice.
Yeah. But I am looking forward to coming there. I think Greg might be there, but I'm not sure because he's got.
Let's definitely organise something. That'd be so fun.
Absolutely. All right, Ully.
Okay, great to speak to you.
Yeah, this should be sent to you through Skype. It gives us both a copy, so I think you'll have one.
Okay, brilliant. Perfect.
All right, take care. Have a great day. Bye.